Senator, I responded to Senator Kennedy's questions based on a publicly filed document that described the Attorney General as a...
Did you talk to Stephen Miller?
I'm not going to describe the participants in conversations.
So you won't answer that question?
No, I will not, Senator.
Why?
I respectfully refer you back to my answer, Senator.
I am absolutely flabbergasted that you would come before this committee and refuse to tell us basic facts about a case that is at the core of the challenges to the appearance of impropriety that should disqualify you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to America First, the channel that always puts our great nation and its values ahead of the political games coming out of Washington, D.C. Before we dive into today's content, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that notification bell because we're bringing you the truth that the mainstream media won't tell you. And if you want to support real patriotic content that fights for conservative values, head over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/AmericaFirst, where you can support this channel for as low as $5 a month. Today, we're talking about something that has my blood absolutely boiling, and it should have yours boiling too if you care about justice, fairness, and the rule of law in this country. We just witnessed one of the most disgraceful displays of partisan grandstanding I've ever seen in a Senate confirmation hearing, and it comes courtesy of Senator Richard Blumenthal, the same guy who lied about serving in Vietnam, going after Emil Bove, a highly qualified nominee who deserves better than this political theater.
Senator Whitehouse raised this so-called deliberative process privilege. First, this committee and Congress have never accepted that kind of assertion as a basis to evade questioning in this kind of confirmation hearing. But I'd like to point out also that this witness has no right to invoke that privilege. It's a privilege for the government of the United States to invoke. Now, I notice that the Deputy Attorney General is sitting right behind the witness. I didn't hear the Deputy Attorney General invoke this privilege on behalf of the government of the United States. And I might point out also that the witness is invoking it selectively. When he wants to answer the question, no privilege. When he wants to avoid answering the question, he says he's not at liberty to answer it. We've never accepted that kind of tactic on the part of a witness. Yes, nominees have sometimes said they can't comment on a case or an issue because it may come before them as a judge. But this kind of selective invoking of a privilege smacks of evasion and defiance, and I think reflects on us as a committee if we accept it in this context, Mr. Chairman. So I hope that the witness may be instructed to answer these questions, or we can have a resolution somehow on the legitimacy of this kind of privilege and ask the witness to come back. Let me begin my questioning.
Mr. Chairman, I think the clock was started on Senator Blumenthal while he made his point of order. It might be a courtesy to allow it to be. Thank you. There it is.
I hadn't noticed that, Mr. Chairman, but I thank Senator Whitehouse for pointing it out. Thank you.
Let me say in the future,
Mr. Bove,
Whitehouse made very clear the issues you're bringing up, and I said I'm willing to discuss them. But
thank you.
We can't take the time of this committee to hear a repeat of everything from every member that would disagree with what I said in my opening statement.
I appreciate
Senator
your
Blumenthal.
point, Mr. Chairman. I'll begin my questioning. Mr. Bove, you responded to Senator Kennedy's questions about who was consulted about the dismissal of charges against Mr. Adams. Did you ever talk to Stephen Miller before you filed the memorandum on February 10th ordering the dismissal of the Adams charges?
Senator, I responded to Senator Kennedy's questions based on a publicly filed document that described the Attorney General as a...
Did you talk to Stephen Miller?
I'm not going to describe the participants in conversations.
So you won't answer that question?
No, I will not, Senator.
Why?
Because It is not appropriate for me to discuss.
It is appropriate for you to tell us whom you consulted before taking action on behalf of the United States of America. You have no basis to avoid that question, Mr. Bove.
Respectfully, Senator, I'm answering that question in a manner similar to several nominees before me, including Judge Katzen.
Did you talk to anyone in the White House, including the president, about dismissal of the Adams charges before the February 10th memorandum?
I respectfully refer you back to my answer, Senator.
I am absolutely flabbergasted that you would come before this committee and refuse to tell us basic facts about a case that is at the core of the challenges to the appearance of impropriety that should disqualify you. You have the opportunity to clear the air, to come clean with the American people as well as this committee, and you are evading and avoiding these questions.
Senator, if you have a question about the position that I took in public with respect to the Mayor Adams case, I'm happy to address it, and I've addressed several today.
Well, I have asked you a question that bears on the appearance of impropriety. Let me go on. Mr. Bove, in court, you represented, first, that there was no quid pro quo, but you said that the decision, even if there were a quid pro quo, was unreviewable by the court. Do you stand by that?
I don't think that's what I said, Senator, because it's not consistent with the rule, which explicitly provides.
Well, you said it not only once, but you said it a number of times, and the judge observed, Judge Ho said, that your position was, quote, fundamentally incompatible with the basic promise of equal justice under law. That's what he said about your position, that the decision to dismiss these charges was unreviewable. Do you stand by that assertion?
I never made that assertion, and the judge granted the motion, Senator.
He granted the motion, but he disagreed with your premise that it was unreviewable. Let me ask you, are decisions to dismiss cases, as with that one, unreviewable?
The text of Rule 48 requires, in the instances presented by the Adams case, that dismissal only be provided for with leave of the court. That's as near a quote as I can give you, and the entire brief that I submitted acknowledged that point because we were seeking the leave.
Mr. Bove, I am concerned about the quid pro quo that the judge concluded had been done. In fact, he said everything here smacks of a bargain. Everything here smacks of a bargain. But the quid pro quo that really concerns me is the one that brings you here today. You were virtually the only attorney in the Department of Justice willing to go to court and make a claim that career prosecutors said violated their basic standard of ethics. And the quid pro quo was a nomination to the Court of Appeals. That's the appearance that the American people can take away from your sitting before us with that nomination. And I think it does grave damage to respect for the rule of law, notwithstanding your assertions about your adherence to it, for you to be here as a result of that stand by you. Let me ask you about a separate issue, the firing of prosecutors and investigators who were involved in the January 6th prosecutions. You were involved in purging prosecutors who, in good faith and an exercise of their prosecutorial judgment, they went to court, they brought charges, you purged them. Isn't that correct?
I don't agree with the use of the word purged, Senator.
Well, you fired them.
I authorized the termination of probationary employees at that U.S. Attorney's Office, yes.
Because they prosecuted the January 6th rioters.
No, because I was concerned about efforts in the prior administration to embed those prosecutors as permanent employees at the U.S. Attorney's Office.
And you also fired the FBI investigators involved in the January 6th prosecution, correct?
No, that's not accurate.
You worked with Director Patel in firing them, correct?
No, that's not accurate.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to pivot away from the Democrats' fake outrage.
Let me break down exactly what happened here, because the mainstream media is going to spin this in the worst possible way, and they're going to make Emil Bove look like he's hiding something, when in reality, he's following proper legal protocols that have been established for decades. This is about more than just one nomination, folks. This is about the weaponization of our confirmation process by Democrats who can't stand the fact that competent, principled conservatives are being nominated to important positions. First, let's talk about this so-called deliberative process privilege that Blumenthal is making such a big deal about. Blumenthal acts like Bove is making this up out of thin air, but anyone who understands how government works knows this is a legitimate legal principle. The deliberative process privilege exists to protect the internal decision-making processes of government agencies so that officials can have frank, honest discussions without worrying that every word will be twisted and used against them in political hearings like this one. What Blumenthal is really upset about is that he can't get Bove to give him the kind of soundbite that Democrats can use to attack Trump's nominees. This is the same playbook they used with Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, and every other conservative nominee. They demand answers to questions that nominees legitimately cannot answer due to legal constraints. Then they act outraged when the nominee follows proper protocols. And let's be clear about something else. Blumenthal claims that Bove is invoking this privilege selectively, but that's exactly how privileges work in the legal system. You invoke them when they apply, and you don't invoke them when they don't apply. That's not selective, that's following the law. Would Blumenthal prefer that Bove just ignore legal privileges entirely? Of course he would, because that would give Democrats more ammunition to attack him. Now, let's get to the heart of what this is really about. The Adams case. For those who don't know, this involves Mayor Eric Adams of New York City, and Bove was involved in decisions regarding the prosecution. Blumenthal is trying to make it seem like there was some kind of corrupt deal, some quid pro quo, but he's not providing any evidence of that. He's just throwing around accusations and hoping something sticks. What we actually know is that Bove filed a memorandum regarding the dismissal of charges, and he did so following proper legal procedures. The court ultimately granted the motion, which means a federal judge looked at the legal arguments and found them to be sound. But Blumenthal doesn't want to talk about that because it doesn't fit his narrative. Instead, Blumenthal wants to focus on who Bove talked to before making this decision. Well, here's a newsflash for Senator Blumenthal. Attorneys are supposed to consult with their colleagues and superiors before making major decisions. That's called being thorough and responsible. The fact that Bove won't reveal the details of privileged communications shows that he understands and respects the boundaries of legal privilege, which is exactly what we should want in a judicial nominee. But here's where it gets really rich. Blumenthal has the audacity to suggest that Bove's nomination is somehow a reward for his handling of the Adams case. This is the same kind of conspiracy theory thinking that Democrats always resort to when they can't make a substantive argument against a nominee. They can't attack Bove's qualifications, they can't attack his legal reasoning, so they have to invent some kind of corrupt bargain. The reality is that Emil Bove is an exceptionally qualified nominee with a distinguished career in public service. He's exactly the kind of person we should want on our federal courts, someone who understands a law, follows proper procedures, and isn't afraid to make tough decisions when the law requires it. The fact that Democrats are trying to destroy his reputation with these baseless accusations tells you everything you need to know about their priorities. And let's talk about the January 6th issue that Blumenthal brought up at the end. This is where the Democrats' true agenda really shows through. Blumenthal accuses Bove of purging prosecutors who were involved in January 6 prosecutions, but Bove corrected him immediately. He said he authorized the termination of probationary employees, which is completely different from purging experienced prosecutors. The reality is that the previous administration tried to embed certain prosecutors as permanent employees, and Bove was concerned about this. That's not purging, that's proper personnel management. Every new administration has the right to make personnel decisions, especially when it comes to probationary employees who don't have the same job protections as permanent staff. But notice how Blumenthal frames this. He uses inflammatory language like purged and tries to make it sound like Bove was targeting people for their work on January 6 cases. There's no evidence of that, but Blumenthal doesn't care about evidence. He cares about creating a narrative that will energize his base and make Bove look bad. This is the same Senator Richard Blumenthal who falsely claimed he served in Vietnam, remember. This is a guy who has no problem lying about his own military service, but he wants us to believe that he's some kind of guardian of truth and justice. Give me a break. The hypocrisy here is staggering. Democrats spent 4 years undermining Trump's presidency, weaponizing the Justice Department, and using every dirty trick in the book to go after conservatives. Now, they want to lecture us about the appearance of impropriety. They want to talk about the rule of law. These are the same people who supported the Russia hoax, the impeachment circus, and every other attempt to overturn the results of a legitimate election. What we're seeing here is a perfect example of how the confirmation process has been corrupted by partisan politics. Instead of evaluating nominees based on their qualifications and judicial philosophy, Democrats use these hearings as an opportunity to score political points and create viral moments for social media. Emil Bove deserves better than this. The American people deserve better than this. We deserve a confirmation process that's based on merit, not political theater. We deserve senators who ask serious questions about judicial philosophy and legal reasoning, not gotcha questions designed to create controversy. And let's be honest about what's really happening here. Democrats are terrified that Trump is going to appoint qualified conservatives to important positions. They're terrified that these nominees will actually follow the Constitution and the rule of law instead of legislating from the bench. So they're doing everything they can to obstruct, delay, and destroy these nominations. But here's the thing, patriots. The American people saw through this strategy in the last election. They rejected the politics of personal destruction and chose leaders who will actually fight for our values. They chose Donald Trump because they want judges who will interpret the law as written, not make up new laws based on their personal political preferences. Emil Bove represents exactly the kind of judicial nominee we need more of. He's someone who understands that judges are supposed to apply the law, not create it. He's someone who respects legal precedent and follows proper procedures. He's someone who won't be intimidated by political pressure or media attacks. The fact that Blumenthal is so desperate to attack him tells you that Bove must be doing something right. If he were a weak nominee who would go along with the liberal agenda, Democrats would be singing his praises. The fact that they're trying to destroy him means they see him as a threat to their judicial activism. This is bigger than just one nomination, folks. This is about the future of our judicial system. Do we want judges who will follow the Constitution and the rule of law, or do we want judges who will rubber stamp whatever the liberal establishment wants? Do we want a confirmation process based on merit and qualifications, or do we want political theater and character assassination? The choice is clear, and it's why we need to support nominees like Emil Bove. He's exactly the kind of person we need on our federal courts, principled, qualified, and committed to the rule of law. The attacks against him are not based on any legitimate concerns about his qualifications or judicial philosophy. They're based on pure partisan politics and the desperate attempt by Democrats to obstruct Trump's agenda. I want to be clear about something else. When Bove refuses to answer certain questions, he's not being evasive or defiant, as Blumenthal claims. He's following established legal protocols that protect the integrity of the judicial system. These protocols exist for good reasons, and previous nominees from both parties have followed them. The idea that Bove should violate these protocols just to satisfy Blumenthal's political grandstanding is absurd. We should want nominees who understand and respect the boundaries of legal privilege, not nominees who will say whatever senators want to hear regardless of the legal consequences. And let's talk about the broader context here. The Biden administration weaponized the Justice Department in ways we've never seen before. They went after parents at school board meetings, they targeted pro-life activists, they raided Trump's home, and they prosecuted political opponents. Now, they want to lecture us about the appearance of impropriety? The real impropriety is using the Justice Department as a political weapon, which is exactly what the Biden administration did for 4 years. Emil Bove represents a return to the proper role of the Justice Department, enforcing the law fairly and impartially, not serving as the enforcement arm of one political party. This is why the stakes in these confirmation hearings are so high. We're not just talking about individual nominees, we're talking about the future of justice in America. Do we want a system where the law is applied equally to everyone, or do we want a system where your political beliefs determine how you're treated by the courts? The attacks on Emil Bove are really attacks on the rule of law itself. Democrats can't stand the idea that we might have judges who will actually follow the Constitution instead of making up new rights based on their personal political preferences. They can't stand the idea that we might have prosecutors who will enforce the law fairly instead of targeting political opponents. That's why this confirmation hearing was so important, and that's why Blumenthal's behavior was so disgraceful. Instead of having a serious discussion about judicial philosophy and legal qualifications, we got a political hit job designed to create controversy and energize the Democratic base. But here's what gives me hope, patriots. The American people are smarter than the politicians think they are. They can see through this kind of political theater. They understand the difference between legitimate oversight and partisan grandstanding. And they're tired of the politics of personal destruction that has poisoned our confirmation process. Emil Bove is going to be confirmed, and he's going to serve with distinction on the federal bench. He's going to follow the law, respect the Constitution, and restore integrity to our judicial system. And Democrats like Richard Blumenthal are going to have to live with the fact that their smear tactics failed. This is what winning looks like, folks. This is what happens when we elect leaders who are committed to appointing qualified conservatives to important positions. This is what happens when we fight back against the politics of personal destruction and demand a confirmation process based on merit rather than partisan politics. So let's support Emil Bove. Let's support President Trump's judicial nominees, and let's continue fighting for a justice system that treats all Americans fairly regardless of their political beliefs. That's what America First is all about, and that's why we're going to keep fighting for these principles no matter how hard the establishment tries to stop us. Remember to like this video if you agree that Emil Bove deserves better than Blumenthal's political theater. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and support us on Patreon at patreon.com/America First. We're going to keep bringing you the truth that the mainstream media won't tell you, and we're going to keep fighting for the America First agenda that puts our country and our values ahead of partisan politics. Thanks for watching, patriots, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll continue exposing the truth about what's really happening in Washington, D.C. Keep fighting for America, and never let the establishment tell you that their way is the only way. We know better, and we're going to keep proving it every single day.